Welcome to Virtual for Real, the Rapid Pipeline podcast. I'm Max, your host, and with me today on the show is the amazing Martin Enthed. Martin, welcome.
Thank you so much, Max, for having me on.
Yeah, great to have you here as well. And I think many people already know you in the industry, but for the ones that don't, let me see how I say that. When you think about 3D and digital twins within the past 2 decades, there have been many pioneering achievements in the space by a certain Swedish furniture company. And that started off with CGI, where they were really leading the field. And then also with AR and real-time 3D for e-commerce, where they were again leading the field. And I remember, for example, when the first ARKit functionalities came out for the iPhone, you could put things in your space. And that company was one of the ones that provided the first application for that. And one reason for that is, Martin, I think your work and the work of your team. And so I think you have, if I can say, really been like an industry like father figure for like 3D commerce and like digital twins of virtual products. So that's what's really cool to have the chance to talk with you today here on the show. And yeah, without further ado, I would just hand it over to you and just kindly ask if you could give us a small intro about your journey in 3D and digital twins.
Yeah, of course. It sounds like I've been around forever, but maybe I have, at least in the CGI world. It didn't, my journey in this didn't start that way. I started when I was 12, 13 doing programming. And I did that for about 9 years. Then I stumbled on computer graphics, early 90s, and I had started my own company selling 3D Studio actually, and 3D Studio DOS version first,
Wow, cool.
and then Max when it came out. Then after 9 years, I sold my company and I moved to the company who bought it, and then I was there for about 9 years doing this as a consultant. And then I did 2 9-year things at IKEA. And that's the two things that you were talking about. The first 9 years at IKEA was really to take using 3D or CGI to render marketing images next to photos. It's not replacing photos because that in a way would have been easier, but making them so they look the same as a photo from a studio with a Hasselblad camera or any other brand of camera. And that was the first 9 years. And then, as you were saying, then AR and those kind of things came along. So since 2016, the last 9 years at IKEA was around spatial computing, understanding 3D spaces, and AI, and all those kind of things in like innovation environment with a team doing that. So it was two different things at IKEA in a way, but everything has been around programming and like the last 35 years, anything around computer graphics and 3D.
Wow, yeah, amazing. And I think I learned this only when we started our company, like about 8 years ago. But I think most people might still not know this. How much of the IKEA catalog, which is, I think, now purely digital, but for very long it was this big physical catalog, how much of that nowadays is computer generated versus photography?
The the actual printed catalog had lower percentages because those were also often made videos on or films with humans in. But if you took the whole production in 2017, 2018, when the catalog was still around and all the brochures and everything, then we were up at 65, 70% of every image. Most of those were made for the product information pages because that's where the huge volume is.
Right.
But it was also rooms and room sets and so on. And a ton of it was in kitchens because that's where the most complicated stuff was. And most of the exchanges, people forget, they think that IKEA only exists in one country. It's 63 when I left now. I don't know if they added one more. It goes really fast in that company. But it's different. And that means that homes look super different in different parts of the world. Different kind of hobs, different kind of fans, different kind of fridges. It's so different, but people don't really recognize that because you live in one country, mostly.
Yeah, I heard this actually at some point. Someone told me that they said, "Hey, Max, you live in Germany, and in Germany, you have the biggest pillows in the world," or something like that. And then I started looking around and realized, yes, we have really large pillows. But that means, like, when I render an IKEA bed with the pillow on it and I show it in Germany, it better have a big pillow. Otherwise, people maybe subconsciously associate it with This is not my
Sometimes.
home. I don't know.
I didn't do it, but a friend of mine was doing the textile stuff for beds for a few years. And I don't remember the exact numbers, but they were up to 20 or more different versions of things. Every country has a few versions, but then when you're adding it up, it becomes a ton of versions. And that's really going back to why it all started so early at IKEA. When I started, it was only a few people working with CGE and only a few pictures made in a year. And it took 4 or 5 years until it could be done in volume. But the reason was mainly the product images and all the variations of those. But then all the scenes, full rooms and all that came along very fast afterwards. But the real reason was the pure volume of product information pictures.
That makes sense. And recently I heard someone saying that the real value of CGI for marketing is not just that you save costs in terms of, hey, previously I was doing a picture, now I do CGI and it's whatever, 20% cheaper, but you can do things that you couldn't do otherwise, right? So you can sell more or sell in other countries or things like that.
You can do
because you
variations.
produce.
That's a beautiful thing. And then you can also keep consistency when it comes to how it looks. So if you have a product line, you're adding a few new products to that product line next year, you can have the same angles, the same lighting. And it's like saving a setup in a physical place where you can just go and put your things in. The consistency, that's the thing. And you can also very fast go back and change. Okay, I want a new standard. You can do a lot of that with AI also now if you know what you're doing, but it's easier when you have it, and especially if you are the manufacturer, then you should actually have a 3D model or at least good documentation of your thing.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I could talk about this for hours probably. Let's also transition then later to this topic, what you just brought up, like relationship between 3D and AI, which also has been topic of the past couple episodes here. You mentioned consistency, so let's keep that in the back of our mind and we'll come back to that later because it's super interesting. But yeah, it's just amazing to see like the IKEA journey as one example where a company really looked at like the needs and the workflows and came up with something that other companies are adopting now. And maybe just last thing, I heard that even on the photography side, IKEA had one of the biggest photo studios like in Europe, or maybe the biggest in Europe or something like that. So it's not like they haven't done photography. We're really knowing what they're doing and then coming up with CGI where it made sense. And that got big.
It's a big studio. I don't know how big compared to other things, but it's a huge studio and that's still active. I would say that the volume increase the last 10 years or 15 years has been taken in CGI. So otherwise the studio would have been 3 or 4 times bigger. So it's not that you close down anything, it's just that you take the volume increase in something else.
And then, sorry,
yeah.
God.
Yeah, I was thinking I didn't know, but when I quit now in October, I got a lot of people like sending stuff to me and so on and congratulating me for all the work we've done and so on. But one thing that was standing out for me was that I got from retail competitors to IKEA, I got some really nice things from them that they were saying that we were leading the way for them into,
Right.
and so they could build things and they could do things. And to be honest, I personally never saw them as competitors because we don't compete on computer graphics. We compete on the products we sell. And that's also the reason why I was very active in Kronos and active to start Alliance of USD and so on. It was to lower the cost for everyone, not really only for IKEA. That was also fun around the things around the standards and so on. And I sat as vice president also in Kronos for 4 or 5 years or something like that. That was also one of the things that I think was really important to take part in, because IKEA is still a very big part of my heart. It is a low cost company as well as a quality company. It's the same, both of them are in there. So trying to compete on the things that are different and then try to use standardized stuff on everything else. That's at least how I interpret the way of doing it. But that's the past now. I've moved on since IKEA.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe we can also talk a little bit about your role at Enthed, where you just started. And yeah, like the standards aspect, I would love to come back to that as well at some point. I remember I think even meeting your team in Kronos 3D Commerce Group. And I think Enthed, like the new company where you're working now, 3D commerce is also, or commerce that is supported by CGI and AI and 3D technology is also one of the biggest fields for them, right? Or how's
Absolutely.
that?
You can say we have two different legs. One is the retail creating images, both with 3D and AI. So doing both of that and keeping templates and keeping the retailers' way of doing stuff so they can have standards internally and follow them. That's what that part is doing. And the part where I'm mainly working is the one that I could say that I worked the last 5 years at IKEA with. It's the how do you describe or would you in the future train an AI brain to understand space, not only can understand noisy pixels in an image and make it a good looking image of it, or being able to guess the next word in a text, but actually understanding three-dimensional spaces. And my personal belief is that you need to do that from some kind of 3D. You can do that in so many ways, but you have to capture the 3D and give it to the actual AI training brain to make it understand spaces or understand things, to be honest.
So that makes a lot of sense. And maybe just taking a slight step back from like CGI to also real-time 3D and like 3D in general, I was wondering about your take on this. So let's say even if we just look at XR, right? Like why would I anyway want to have something 3D? So yes, to generate better 2D pictures with AI, okay. But then beyond that, so like maybe we can also talk about simulation and things like that. But even in commerce, so let's say I'm opening my browser and I have the chance to look at well done XR or 3D version of my furniture piece or whatever it is. Something that you can put in your room, could be a plant, could be whatever. So like when you really take a step back and you look at digital twins and 3D compared to just a flat image, what is the difference to you? Because sometimes we say, oh, it's complicated, right? I don't know how to interact with it, or I don't know, it always looks worse, or I don't know, I'm not a game person, I can't do 3D. Like, and then there are other people who are obsessed with it and say this is the way, like everything should be like three-dimensional because that's the world around us.
I think from what I've been doing in the past, and a lot of it has been for marketing and so on. But the real reason to do it is try to convey a message, make a thing understandable. And of course, people should love the thing, mostly if you want to sell it. But you should understand what it is, how big it is, what it's made of, the quality of it. Because the worst thing that can happen is that somebody buys something and you get a return. Well, the absolute worst thing can happen and somebody buys it, doesn't like it, but doesn't say anything, but say to all the people around you, you say how bad it is, because that's the worst thing that can happen, and the company who's selling it will never know. So the best thing that can happen, there are two things that can happen that are good. One, they buy it and they love it, absolute best. The second, they see what it is, understand what it is, and don't want it. That's actually the second best, because then we won't have returns and they don't say how bad it is, but they have totally understood. So I think with my last 7-8 years, I've been doing a lot around how the brain works and how we are understanding space and so on. So the thing I think I've been working on the last 6-7 years is trying to lower the cognitive load for a human. So how can we make a thing understandable with the least amount of time and least amount of effort for a human? And for me, the thing I've found is that if you give something the best thing would be, absolute best thing would be to hold the things in your hand. Then I know how this coffee cup I'm holding in my hand now, and then I know how heavy it is, and it's actually a SIGGRAPH mug.
I have the T-shirt from the same
Oh, it's the
SIGGRAPH.
same.
Not
It's the
T-shirt,
same
the
thing.
pullover. Yeah.
It's SIGGRAPH. Okay.
Okay,
It's one
nice.
of
That
my
was
favorite.
not planned. Yeah.
No, that was not planned. It's one of my
Okay.
favorite mugs. Then you would know how it feels to drink in and all that. But the next best thing would be a 3D thing, so I can turn it around and I can see maybe even how coffee splashes around inside it. Maybe not smelling it because that's really hard, but nevertheless see how big it is and maybe get a feeling of how heavy it is would be super nice. Then I would know what I'm buying. And images have been doing that work, But that's not just because they're good images. That's because your brain is used to taking 2D information from the world. We don't see the world in any way else, and interpreting that into a three-dimensional representation in your brain. So your brain is, for me, if I would like to say this in 3D terms, a 3D engine that takes 2D input and makes a logical 3D version of it in your brain so you understand where you are. And it does that to be able to survive. Where do I have to run if something happens? Where do I find food? Where was I yesterday? What things can I take with me or grab to get something down from a tree? Everything like that is a 3D reconstruction from 2D input. And going back to AI, we need to do the same thing for an AI because it needs to make a 3D reconstruction or something similar to that in its brain. And I don't think you can do that from text because we have killed down the information. I don't think we can do it from images. Yeah, we can, but then you have to let the brain or the robot, if you want to call it that, move around in a 3D space to be able to do the same thing as a human. Otherwise, you will get predefined things with no size information connected to it. And in my personal point of view, I don't think there are many people doing that right now, but I think we could potentially bypass making images and actually feeding 3D directly to the brain. And I know some NVIDIA people have done FVDB and some other things that could make that possible, but it will take a ton of compute to do it.
Thanks. A lot of good stuff here to unpack. So basically, we're saying 3D is the most natural representation for us. We're used to working around not having a 3D representation and working from a picture, right? From to shading
and building
whatnot,
something,
reconstructing something
from many pictures.
But then the next best thing after the real physical thing that we can hold in our hands is a 3D representation of some kind, right? That's for us, for our brain, but also for AI purposes.
I think so. Why should we otherwise have used all these engineering tools to build 3D things when we don't do manufacturing? We are doing that every day. We have been doing it for 25 years at least, or 30, really high-end 3D stuff. So why would we bother if it didn't add anything extra? So there is no, to me, known way of in a computer describing from a human how a thing is connected, what is made of, all the different parts. Every time you go down to text, every time you go down to images, you are flattening the data out. And I get that we do that. I understand why we're doing it because that's the way we have been doing it for so many years. But it must be better to have the most high-end version of the description of a thing and then killing it down when we need to kill it down instead of feeding the AI with it. Don't really understand that. Yeah.
We talked about that before, and I think more anecdotally, maybe we can transition to that example because that is a really nice example that ties back to the beginning of the conversation. So like this Strandmon and Kallax experiment.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that one. It's an example where you have these generative models, and if you feed them with an image, then they can reproduce something from another angle or that with other backgrounds and so on, because then you have given it some kind of input and it can follow that. But if you're trying to make it do something just from a text prompt, it has never seen scale or size, so it's really hard for it to do it really well. It can do it quite okay if it's seen many samples of the two things that you want it to put together. Then it can be close, at least. And the example you're after is that it's an IKEA example, but it's just because IKEA has those names for things that makes very much sense in Swedish, but doesn't really make sense for anyone else. So they are not used on anything else than IKEA's products. And there are a few, and I know two of them that are not really used for anything in Swedish or anything in other languages, I think at least. And that's a Strandmon chair and a Kallax shelf. And if you're asking it to do that, it makes actually quite good images of it. It's scary how many training images it must have had. all of the big Gen AI image generations, but it doesn't really make it correct size. And especially if you add something it's never seen. In my example, you do add a life-size adult giraffe next to it, and then it gets out of whack. But if you steer it with an image, it's fine. But it also, in a way, shows that these things that we have and can get our hands on today haven't been trained on size. It's pixel.
And yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I'm not sure if I spelled Strandmom the right way. Is it ending with an N or M?
It's an Strandmoon. It's an N.
Oh, so I misspelled it, but still, sorry about that. But I did a quick test with, and if you're listening to this and you're not on YouTube, then unfortunately you can't see what I'm about to show. But still,
I haven't
we
seen
can
what you have done.
describe. Yeah, you also haven't seen it. So maybe we can describe it also for the audience. So what I asked Gemini here was give me picture of a 100 centimeter high and 50 centimeter wide lamp. Oh, that's admittedly it's a very wide lamp next to a Strandmom. And yeah, I spelled Strandmom with a ending with an M, but I think it's still clearly a Strandmom
It
armchair
actually
what we're
did.
seeing.
Yeah, it did it, and it actually is a 3-shelf Kallax in behind. Yeah.
Yep, even though I didn't ask for a Calyx, but yep, there is one in behind, in the background. And so yeah, like this is the Strandmon armchair. It really looks like it.
Yeah.
But when we talk about dimensions, I think it couldn't be worse what we're seeing here.
Could be worse, but the Strandmon, if I'm not mistaken, is about a meter high.
101 centimeters. Yep.
Yeah.
That's at least what the IKEA website says. Yeah.
Yeah. And the Kallax third shelf should be approximately a little bit higher than that. So those two are pretty okay. But the lamp is, of course, if that's supposed to be 100 centimeters, then they are all off. But they don't know about size, these things. And you shouldn't expect them to. But they are doing things. It's seen so many things. So the statistical information it has becomes better and better the more things it's been trained on. So the more it has seen something in combination with the other thing, then those two things next to each other would be okay. So if you would do this then with a life-size adult giraffe, you would see that also is strange because I happen to know that it should be 1 meter, 80 centimeters under the belly. It should be making everything very small, but yeah.
Actually,
but that's an example. That's an example, at least. Yes.
It's like you said, the giraffe was way too small compared to the furniture, or the furniture was too big in this case. I don't know. But what we can see here, also in case you're just listening, the lamp, it came out higher, like way higher than the armchair, even though the armchair should be 1 centimeter higher than the lamp, if it's 100 centimeters high, the lamp. But also it has these annotations that say, that's really funny. It's almost cute, I think, like how the AI put like these two labels there. And one really, it put two labels on top. One says 100 centimeter and it's really high. And the other one says 50 centimeter and it's really small. So they're clearly not in relation to each other. And that like even looks a little funny. It's like, it looks very clean, the image to me. But what is 50 centimeter versus 100 here? In reality, when you look at the picture, those two measurements are rather in a ratio of not 1 to 2, but maybe 1 to, I don't know, 6 or so.
And it looks like the Strandmon chair and the Kallax is about 60, 65 centimeters high. If its lamp is 1 meter. But it's really cool that it can do the images it does. And as long as you have a human curating stuff, then it's fine. But you shouldn't expect it to know about size and relationships in a very precise way. It has never been trained on that. The things that normal people can get their hands on, I would say. It might be something in the labs going on right now that has been trained on something. With that caveat, I can say that I haven't seen anything that can do it, at least.
Yeah. And the question is, of course, what does that mean now for AI and digital twins? And we talked a little bit in the past couple episodes about this synergy saying, hey, AI is great for contexts and backgrounds. 3D digital twins are really good if you want to have a precise picture of your product. I think that especially holds when your product hasn't been built yet. For instance, Strandmon, they have been around for so long, as you said, there are so many images of them, sure thing. But what if I'm just building a new product and I want to market it, like,
and then you at
doesn't
least
make
need
sense.
one image, because then they can copy it in a way, but it won't know in precise how it looks on the back and so on. If you don't provide it, you need to provide it for it. Then it can start derive from that, but it can't do it purely from text. Of course it can't.
And yeah, there are other things that were also mentioned, I think in the past episodes, even as brand IP. You have seen now like these IKEA articles here, right? In this, I'm not sure if the Google team that builds Gemini asked IKEA kindly for permission for every picture that they scrape.
I have no clue. IKEA is big,
but
so they might have, but I doubt it.
maybe
But
they
they
have.
might have. I don't know.
But
But you will be getting, if you're asking for an image of anything, you might get any kind of things from any brand in it. And it depends on who you are, if that's a problem or not, and depends on what you're going to use it for. But yes, you will. I've seen so many examples of that. But on the other hand, you will get that in the real world too. If you are going and do a photo shoot somewhere in the world, and you have your product, and then you're putting a lot of other things from a flea market into the image, and then you don't really know, but it might be that some very iconic thing that you happen to get your hands on that then gets into the picture. So the human seeing this needs to have a lot of knowledge, and it's harder when it's invented like this. It's much harder,
Right.
but you have to, I guess you need to follow the same rules as everything else.
Yeah, it seems a little different, but not necessarily better or worse with AI. I also heard, like someone said, what if I want to have a backpack in the background, but I don't want to show any particular backpack of any brand. So can I have an average looking backpack? Maybe AI is good at that, right? I don't know.
Yeah, and in some cases it's okay to use things because you are not selling something or you're just showing an image. So it depends on what you're using it for, of course. But the thing that I'm interested in going forward is all the things that happens around Physicl.ai, everything that happens around like using synthetic training data to do world models, or using 3D to use it inside a simulator to be able to have a robot manipulating it or walking around in spaces and all that. And that's really what I'm up to now and trying to be part of with Infinite. They have a lot of really good people. So I'm absolutely not doing it alone. They have been doing stuff for years already. So I'm just coming in with my knowledge from the past and ideas around standardization and all that, and then trying to help out with anything Physicl.ai. That's what I'm up to right now.
And so if that would play out as you're planning, like what do you think would be like a key milestone or a key innovation that we would get out of this effort, and how could this change the way we, for example, use AI to generate content for marketing or other purposes?
The thing I wanted to try to find the last years at IKEA is something that can understand spaces. Because if it can understand spaces, you can do a lot of the things that people wants to do automatically. Everyone who wants to do spaces want to fill them with things in a logical order like a human would, because of different reasons, depending on what you want to use the space for. If you want to have robots, you want them to be able to roam those spaces and do things and prepare or clean up or rearranging or whatever you want to do with those. And those spaces doesn't have to be like domestic homes. It can be like warehouses or factories or grocery stores or whatever spaces, because a human builds a logical, not super high res, but volume of spaces. I guess I haven't been in where you're sitting now, Max, but I guess you know how to get from where you are out to your car. You have a car?
No, I use car sharing, but I know where the next car of the car sharing station is. Yes,
Yeah,
I know where to
and you
get.
can think about the way how to get there when you're sitting there. You don't have to like build you don't have to see it in 3D, but you can think about all the logical step you have to do to get there. So you have some kind of logical representation of the world, your world, Max's
Right.
world. And I have mine, so I know how to go and take out my dog around my house where I'm sitting right now. And that doesn't have to be super high res. It doesn't have to be photoreal. It's not a 3D thing, but it's a logical thing. And how do you get that kind of thing into a AI brain so it can start doing, okay, if I do this, then that will happen. If that happens, I need to do this. How can I solve this sudden thing has happened? What in my space can I use to try to fix that? Or the things that humans do that we will expect any kind of AI to do. And even if you don't have a physical robot doing it, you probably would like to be able to do the same thing when you're examining a space. Like if you have a pair of glasses and you want to instruct a human to do things or help a human to do things, even if it's wearables, it's the same kind of thing that we want it to do. And I don't think it should have to go down to text and then do it and then go back up again into a more dimensional space. For me, it feels strange that it has to do. That's the way we're doing it now. We're going down to text, trying to do something and going up again. And maybe that can work, but it feels like we're doing it super hard for ourselves.
Yeah, I'm thinking about many different things right now. And like even in commerce, you have, for example, these B2B applications like a store planner also. I'm sure store planning is a very complicated problem in the sense, if you see it as an optimization problem, there's the knapsack problem, which is NP hard. And that's maybe similar. Hey, I have products that, I don't know, people can spot and they sell really well, and I can sell a lot of those. And I have other products that are bigger, they take away more space on the shelf. And then depending on how high you place it on the shelf, it's more in the field of view or less, as we know, right? Like the cheaper products are often on the bottom and whatnot. That can probably be formulated as some kind of spatial optimization problem. And if I have digital twins of all my products and of my store, and I know where the entry is, where people like come in and whatever, like that can be optimized in so many ways, probably by algorithms if they would have a spatial understanding. And yeah, you mentioned getting to my car, right? Like when I'm in the car, like using Google Maps standard now, like that I ask a computer to show me how to get from A to B, and it has a 2D understanding of the world around me. So extending that into other like use cases and dimensions, it makes a lot of sense. But is there something that you see as like maybe a primary application that is attractive and within reach?
There is a lot of companies that already are doing things that starts to look really good, making 3D only from an image and all that. And maybe those can help people at early stages of development, or like taking something and I'm sketching something and I want it in 3D and so on. You could theoretically start doing it inside CAD tools. So you're actually asking it to do this and this. I want to fill it here. I want this there. And because in a way, that's what you're doing as a human. You're sitting there. It's not that a fillet on an edge of a thing just appears. You have thought it, and then you're doing it because you have learned how to do it. But if you're just want that to happen and don't want to or don't need to learn how the tool works, you can still be the inventor of it and get help to do all these tasks. I think that's very close. I'm just guessing that all the big CAD companies are doing that right now. If they don't, please do, because I think that could be useful. You still have to evaluate if it's good or not. That's another thing. Like we have been talking for the last 35 years on a make beautiful button. Like press a button and the thing comes out and it's beautiful and it's correct. We almost there when it comes to AI and generated images, but on the other hand, we can't go backwards and get the data out. We have an image, but now we need to do the actual 3D thing so we can describe it to people. If it could do the 3D thing instead, and then we render it, that would also be super interesting, of course. But that would only be the visual part. What I'm looking at is the simulation part. But you're after what's the next thing? I don't really know. Understanding spaces, I guess, is the next thing, because then you're not moving things. You're not really, you don't have to understand exactly how heavy something is. You don't have to understand the friction of the surface. You only, it's really hard, but you only have to understand how it looks and behaves in light and so on. And it's getting closer and closer, even with things like headsets with only cameras looking out and you're just roaming around and walking. until that is a product that you actually can use. And that's another thing, because then it needs to be super robust. But test use cases have you're already seen. I think everybody who's in this business have seen that.
Okay, so first milestone maybe just more like spatial understanding in AI-driven applications and like generation of three-dimensional content without actually modeling it explicitly.
Yeah, at least as a start, like you can do with an image today, you can get an image and then you can continue from that if you want to. If you can do the same thing in 3D, that would make the actual asset creation much faster. And there's nobody who, yeah, I loved making 3D models back in the days, in the 90s and 2000s. But it's a tedious work. You're really happy when it's done. But if something could help me doing it, I wouldn't mind.
Sure thing. Yeah, sounds great. Makes perfect sense. Wow, yeah, that was a great conversation. Is there something that you're particularly looking forward to this year as maybe more like short-term milestones or anything that excites you around the current developments like AI? You mentioned NVIDIA and what they're doing. Anything you're particularly looking forward to this year? Year is still very young.
Yeah, the year is still very young. I will probably be at GTC, so I'll probably see something there when it comes to all the AI things. It's a super big thing. And then I hope to be at SIGGRAPH to see what's going on there, because the thing that is that it's moving super fast. There are new papers, there are new ideas, there's new companies popping up. Like, I shouldn't say every second, but at least 2 or 3 new things every week. Almost a new thing every day. If you look at Gaussian splats, or if you look at how to describe things or how to understand spaces and worlds and so on. So it's impossible to have an idea on where it's going. It's just how fast it's going. It's just trying to keep up with everything and trying to figure out what actually will be useful. And yeah, there is a ton of people who are interested in the space, and it's super fun to be part of it, even if it's just looking at what everybody else is doing and trying to make sense of it.
Great. Yeah, couldn't agree more. Thanks, Martin, for the great conversation today. It was really a pleasure, many really great insights, and I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I'm
Always
sure our
like
audience
talking to you, Max. I always like talking to you, Max. You know that.
same, Martin. Cool. Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.